G'day YouTube, wobbles on a lot here. Continuing on with my attempt at a chronological recounting of the operations of the Battle of the Coral Sea 79 years ago, more or less focused on 11 and 20 Squadrons Royal Australian Air Force, drawing from this book printed by Jack Riddell in 1992. If we look at the unit history, we find that there's only one operation 79 years ago today. So after reading the unit history and operations record book and playing with me pins as usual for this series, and seeing as we've already had 2 letters from 2 of the aircrew who were participating, we might have another 2 today. Bill Miller, captain of A24-12 and A24-17, whose second pilot, Arthur Lunnan, or presumably his widow, and their connection to Jack Riddell by various diverse pathways, somehow resulted in this book showing up in Badger's old books in Glen Innes. And therefore, when I saw it, I was able to purchase it. However, moving on with the story, because there's lots of other videos on my scroll that have plenty of swamp wallabies eating bread. It turns out that the one flight made by 11 and 20 Squadrons on the 7th of May 1942 departed from Cairns, featuring A24-17, flown by Captain Squadron Leader F.B. Chapman, second pilot, Pilot Officer P.L. Marsh, being Squadron Leader Chapman. And of course, Squadron Leader Chapman, he was Jack Riddell's pilot. You remember that, don't you? Hey? Yes, you remember that. Chapman, Marsh and Company carried out a nighttime search similar to the previous night operation by Sergeant C.W. Miller, which was out to the island of Misima and back after searching the surrounds. Whereas Sergeant C.W. Miller and Lunnan, previous day, they'd spent 15 hours flying time. Chapman and Marsh, they arrived back at Cairns the next morning, airborne at 16:10 hours in the afternoon, waterborne at 12:30 the next day. Flying time 19 hours 50 minutes. So on to the letter from Captain Bill Miller, captain of A24-12 and A24-17. A 1987 vintage letter. Dear Jack, great to hear from you. Attached is a copy of my logbook for May 1942. I'm afraid it gives just the bare bones of each individual flight, so we'll rely on memory to give you some information. My main memory of May the 2nd is the takeoff from Gavutu with a nice white wake of course, whilst a formation of enemy bombers passed overhead towards Tulagi. My thoughts at the time was that they were probably accompanied by fighters, in which case we would be jumped by them very smartly. As you know, nothing happened and we made it back to Moresby. Regards, Gough Hemsworth. He definitely was shot down on the 6th of May. He reported 2 destroyers off Misima Island and being attacked by fighters. 6th of May. Actually, Gough and myself went to the aircraft at Moresby on the same boat, and we agreed that the first off the boat would take off first. I was first off the boat. We didn't make the takeoff. When I subsequently heard that Gough had been shot down, I thought how lucky we were, as if we had made the search area allotted to us, we would no doubt have bought it too. Such is luck. 6th of May, our attempts to take off at Moresby. At the first attempt, we had a bomb load and full tanks of fuel. The water was glassy as far as I can recall. We weren't getting enough power to do the job. And behold, in an old copy of Khaki and Green, we have Harbour Activity Wartime Moresby, a watercolour by V144618. R. Malcolm Warnes. 6th of May, our attempts to take off at Moresby. At the first attempt, we had bomb load and full tanks of fuel. The water was glassy, and as far as I can recall, we weren't getting enough power to do the job. After a couple of tries, back to the buoy where we dumped 300 gallons of fuel. We were still unsuccessful in getting off, so back to the buoy where another 300 gallons were dumped. And you change the bottom plugs of each engine. Okay, so Bill Miller was flying with Jack Riddell this day. I told operations what had happened and received their agreement to go to Cairns. 9th of May. After the float planes that attacked had disappeared, we started to make ourselves scarce also. However, as we did so, Arthur Sandell passed up an apparently fair dinkum message from control that an enemy aircraft carrier was believed to be in position so-and-so and we were to locate it. Needless to say, that didn't impress me at all. And when I asked Arthur for the course to pick up the carrier, he told me he was just having me on. This was quite a relief. Hope you can battle your way through the poor writing, Jack, and if there's any more information you think may be locked away in my memory, don't hesitate to write. Bill. The start of that letter, he mentioned the takeoff from Gavutu. This is the advanced operating base at Gavutu Island, damaged by the Japanese bombers. Now we'll come to Ted Sturtevant, first wireless telegrapher from A24-17 under Frank Chapman, the 1990 vintage letter, which turns out to be adjacent to a rather nice mud map, which is actually a copy of the chart made up and used by navigator Bob Byrne on the Bayliss, May 1942, on their voyage from Tulagi to Vila. The Japanese landed at Tulagi, and these fellas crowded onto a fishing boat, or a barge, or RAAF, Advanced Operating Base Gavutu, Escape Vessel, Motor Vessel Bayliss, RAAF and Australian Imperial Forces survivors escape on board the Vila on the 3rd of May 1942. Gavutu. Those are both prior to the Japanese bombings. RAAF Gavutu, Advanced Operating Base, tunnel in the side of the hill, originally the bomb dump, but also used as an air raid shelter. RAAF Advanced Operating Base Gavutu, fuel barge Betty Jane. And these are the May 1942 RAAF personnel from Tulagi to Vila travel on the Bayliss. Because it's not often you get a photo like that from that period with all the names. Left to right back row, Laurie Cummins, Reg Daly, Jack McDonald, Ray Rees, Ron Welsh, Mick Myatt and Tom Archer. Middle row, Tom Fristag, Tom Hoare, Cliff Searle, Jim Healy, Joe Gully, Arthur Beale, Frank Kelly. Front row, Lloyd Bennett, Ken Stewart, Paul Heesh, Richard Cairns, Keith Robinson. Forward of the front left-hand side, Dick Hayes and reclining Les Turner. This photograph taken on HMAS Manura on the 25th of May 1942 en route from Noumea to Sydney. Names provided courtesy of Mrs. Tom Archer. Okay, I'll read from the photocopy. You can have a look at the original book. From Ted Sturtevant, first wireless telegrapher A24-17 under Captain Frank Chapman. 15th of May 1990. Dear Jack, it was wonderful to hear from you after all this time. I gather the thing of most importance would be my logbook, but unfortunately I long ago lost them. To explain, the first logbook had to be destroyed along with all the other printed guff on the eve of the Japanese occupation in Rabaul. The second logbook, while not having many entries, I left on a Catalina in Moresby, which the foe saw fit to burn. The third book, which contained the remainder of my time on Catalinas to April 1943, 12 months at Williamtown on Vultee to April 44, then from that time until February 46 on Libs. It seems incredible, but that was lost in one of my many moves since the war. Yes, Jack, I did fly with Frank Chappie on A24-17, been racking my brains to remember some details. To relate as best my memory permits, A24-17 left Moresby in, I think, early May, night departure for supply dropping. What might have been some help was at the time the last ditch stand was being made on the Kokoda Trail near Moresby. A24-17 was the only cat in Moresby Harbour at the time. We proceeded to New Ireland, dropping supplies south of Caving, but then we went over to Bougainville, dropping further supplies. Then a limited on-track search proceeding to Cairns. We arrived at Cairns not long before dark. There were no service personnel of any form in Cairns, and we stayed at the Hydes Hotel. The first 2 nights, we did a dusk to dawn search for the task force. From memory, it was in that area south of Bucca Island and Bougainville. The first night, near dawn, we intercepted a message saying that the task force had retired to Bucca Passage. I'm not sure if it was the next night or 2 days later. I think it was 2 days later because I recall we had to do our own bombing up. I remember we dropped one 250-pound armour-piercing bomb trying to get down those slippery steps at the end of the wharf at Cairns. The second night search, Chappie made contact with the task force. I remember this because it was the first time I had occasion to break wireless telephone silence, and when the air search vessel radar went on the blink, Chappie kept contact by going in close to draw some fire. The next part I'm not sure of, but after returning to Cairns in the late afternoon was when you came into Cairns with Bill Miller with a very perforated Catalina. I feel you had been there and completed a rescue before you got shot up. I think it was the day following A24-17's return to Cairns that the naval battle was fought. That'll be the battle of that there then. Japanese Aircraft Carrier Task Force, American Area Carrier Task Force, 10:30 in the morning of the 7th, 9:35 on the morning of the 7th. Recapping, I think it was the day following A24-17 return to Cairns that the naval battle was fought. The following day, A24-17 was at dawn in the area where the engagement took place searching for survivors. I recall this very vividly because we sighted an empty float and bits of wreckage. Chappie came around to each of the crew in late afternoon and pointed out that because we were about 9 hours out of Cairns, we would lose too much time returning to fuel, and asked if we were prepared to let him have a go at alighting to spend the night on the water and resume the search at first light. He said he would not do it if the disposition of the crew indicated otherwise. Of course, he got the okay, and I will always remember that occasion. Sitting at the wireless telephone in the navigation compartment, I looked through the cockpit, and even with the angle for a stall landing, I could not see any sky. Then we hit. The second pilot put the throttles through the gate, and with the nose-up attitude, we gained some height before coming down in a stall turn to hit and follow a wave crest and clearing the water. I'm sure it would have been a good 60 or 70 seconds he fought that wave top. I think it was 2 days later we went to Brisbane. Chappie tried to form a base. We used the Qantas facilities and rented a house at Hamilton. 2 other crews joined us, and as shipping on the coast was suffering losses, we did anti-submarine patrols. The attempted landing on the open sea was a highlight. From even 1,000 feet, the ocean looked calm enough, but in fact it was about a 10 or 20 or 12 metre roller. So 30, 35 foot is probably what he originally wrote, but in 1991-92, the Australian government was pretty Nazi-ish when it came to not allowing anybody to publish anything in imperial measurements. So we get these two old geezers allegedly speaking about what happened in 1942, giving wave heights in metres. It was only the day before that Frank told the second pilot, Peter Marsh, that if he ever doubted a situation, don't wait to be told, just hit the throttles. Peter did that, and he did it so hard that he split the skin between his fingers. Now the crew members on A24-17 were F. Chapman, captain, second pilot Peter Marsh, navigator Lou Dunham, myself, Bill McLean, wireless telegrapher, Phil Bramley, armourer, and Ron Everingham, second armourer. After Brisbane, we went to Rathmines, across to Noumea bombing Tulagi, and then back to Rathmines. I must tell you that I visited Bill Miller about last October. He's now in the RSL Park Hostel at Frankston. Bill seems to be something of a recluse. He does not seem to be interested in any of the association's activities. He was very grateful for the visit. Must go again soon. We'll try and keep in touch. So for now, cheers. That was 1990. 3 years after Bill Miller had written his letter. Right, that's your lot then for the 7th of May 1942. I'm going to turn the radio on and listen to the news on me wireless. Warbles on a lot to YouTube. Ciao.